So hello and welcome to this. Where is the camera? Here.
Yes.
Yeah. To this live question session. We have we have some time to discuss with each other. I'm waiting for your questions, and then I'll take them in the order that they pop up, or if they are related together, I'll take them together. So thanks for being here. Good. Any questions? Il voit tous les autres poser des questions. Non. So everybody is waiting for somebody to ask a question.
Are you sure Derek seen the video? No.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe before any concrete questions come up, yeah, please ask a question. Somebody asked whether they ask a question. Please ask a question now. Yes. Please. Okay, so we have a first question. How do you see the relationship, I think, between smart home and smart cities? Good question. The smart home is inside the house or even inside an apartment. It's an element of a smart city, but it's not yet a smart city. It helps you to somehow optimize your energy consumption, your heating, your electricity consumption, and that would have to be connected somehow to the energy activities in the city. I think the smart home is just one little element of a smart city.
Like transport and energy.
Yeah, there are. I mean, in the MOOC we have talked about energy and transport. There may be other elements. I mean, it's one element, but there may be smart water, smart waste. All these elements can be optimized thanks to the information and communication technology. Okay, Okay, so I see a lot. I see some questions. I'm trying to. So there is a question about the strategies to promote and implement digitalization in the transport sector in India. So that's a little bit far-fetched from me. I mean, ultimately, those are. I suppose in our MOOC we have really taken the city as a relevant entity, and the transportation sector would have to be. You could have a national policy for the whole of the transportation sector, but I think what we would really look at is more transport in a given city and how you introduce. Sort of digitalization into transportation in a given city. Typically, this is something that comes together with that there is a public policy initiative. There must be the private sector who puts in digitalization. There are actors that link the data together. I think it is difficult. This question is difficult to answer. I think you need a public policy initiative. You need the city government to set some conditions, but then ultimately you would have some private investors and some private companies that see an advantage in it. Yeah, so we really think that building the smart city, including in transportation, is somehow a bottom-up initiative. You would start with particular elements in a city, and the policy level is to set the conditions for these bottom-up initiatives to emerge. Okay, next question. Citizen participation. I don't really understand the question. I mean, citizen participation. Okay, maybe you'll take another question first. I mean, there's so many questions. Let's take this question. Is the smart city concept applicable to all the cities? And I mean, it's potentially applicable to all the cities. It's just the implementation will depend from one city to the other, and I think you have to really you have to think whether you have a historical city, a legacy system into which those, I think, would be the two main differences. Are you putting smart city concepts into a historical old city, or are you building a smart city from scratch? I think that those would be two totally different approaches. The legacy city approach is probably a little bit more complicated because there are more interests involved, more actors involved, and the greenfield approach you can really draw a new map, but this approach may also be a little bit more risky because you could get everything wrong. Let's take another question. Difference between smart and resilient cities. Okay, so we have presented to you, a framework where we basically say there are different performance objectives, efficiency, sustainability, and resilience. We think that smart, the use of the information and communication technologies, can help, in particular in two ways, to make cities more efficient and to make cities more resilient. Sustainability is probably, I mean, there is a relationship between efficiency and if a city becomes more efficient, it will also be more sustainable. But it's not necessarily that smart is solving the sustainability issue. However, on the resilience side, I think it is clear that the information and communication technologies, the data that you have, can allow you to manage the city in much more resilient ways. You have more options, you have more alternatives, and you can learn from one element to the other. So clearly, for us, digitalization is a means to make cities more resilient. Maybe another question? Automated cars. What is my view on automated cars? Okay, so maybe there are different technologies. I mean, automated is not necessarily automatically smart. You can automatize things, and you would have to connect these automated cars to one another thanks to the ICTs to somehow build them into into a smart city concept. I mean, to have to have simply cars that are driving around by themselves instead of having a driver is not necessarily part of a smart city concept. You would have to connect these automated cars to some broader management or governance scheme of the city. So in the course, we have talked about demand pull and technology push, and typically automated cars would more be a technology push. Somebody would develop these, and then somebody would adopt these, but we have to see whether automated cars will be taken up by the users and whether they can actually be built into a smart city system. There is also this question that we have raised. Somehow the idea of smart urban mobility is to have less cars, to have mobility solutions instead of having simply the same old cars driving in an automated way. Okay, another question about examples of smart water services. Yes, it's true. In the course, we have not really talked about smart water. There, we have taken two areas: energy and transport, and we could do others. So, smart water. I mean, there is a lot of waste of water in an urban infrastructure system. The most obvious one are the leakages. There are huge leakages in water systems, varying from city to city, but typically you can have, I would say, average city 10 to 15% of the water is lost in leakages, but in some cities goes up to 30-40%. So smart water services will, with sensors, will help you detect where these leakages are. You can repair them in a more instead of digging up the whole street and trying to find where the leakage is. You can then have a much more targeted repair strategy. Smart water also is about in the home. Before we talked about the home, it's also about maybe turning off the tap, automated taps. People turn off the tap and then they forget and it runs for the rest of the day. Or toilets that are water is running all the time. All these devices that detect waste of water, not use. So you can significantly reduce the consumption of water thanks to the information and communication technologies. Other question, the whole question of, I'm asked about the role of the telecom operators in developing smart cities. They have, of course, an important. So let's a little bit talk first on the historical role that telecom operators play in rolling out the telecom infrastructure. In the course, we have shown to you that the telecom infrastructures is one of the necessary infrastructures for smart cities, and I would say that is the traditional original role of a telecom operator. You have a telecom network, which could be cable or fiber. Now you go into mobile networks, but we are still talking about a telecom infrastructure on the basis of which you can then connect things. You can put smart devices connected to the telecom infrastructure. And I would say that's the typical traditional role of telecom operators. But now we see that telecom operators want to go further. They don't want to just provide the infrastructure on the basis of which somebody else can develop smart cities and smart city services. So they go into energy management, they go into water management, they go into transportation management. Basically, I think we showed that nicely in the course, because the value added of these is on the service side, not necessarily on the infrastructure side. So naturally, the telecom operators would try to extend their activities into all kind of smart city services. Other question. Okay, I think this is a quite philosophical question. Resilience, the difference between resilience and flexibility, or is there an opposition between resilience for flexibility, or is flexibility a condition for resilience? I think this. I think this is a little bit the definitional kind of issue. I mean, the typical word that we use now is indeed resilience. The resilience is the ability. We also use words like robustness, reactivity, capacity to learn. So if you want to take this in a broad sense, you could say flexibility is also a characteristic of resilience. But the broad word is certainly resilient. A system is resilient. It is capable to basically, and I would say resilience is a little bit more than flexibility. Resilience is the ability to recover from errors or mistakes or shocks or things like that. And that requires flexibility, but flexibility would just be, in my mind, a tool for resilience, not a substitute for resilience. Other questions? I see there are a lot of questions, so okay. What shall we take? Big data. Examples of big data application. I mean, big data is typically it's a totally integrated element of a smart city. The smartness of the city derives from the fact that you have big data and you can analyze these big data in different ways. So, for example, you're asking me for an example. If you look at transport, you have the you have the smart card that people use. That you know where they are traveling, when they enter the system, when they get out of the system, how long they were in the system, and out of all these data that you simply collect with the smart card, there are plenty of other sources. You could collect data about transport from the smartphones from the people, but with these data, then you can manage the transportation system better. You know the flows. I mean, there's sort of two aspects. One is you could historically know where the people traveled to, how much time they spent, and where they wasted their time, where there was congestion, and you could improve that into the future, the next day, the next year, in the planning and things like that. But you could also use the smart data, the big data, simply for displaying these kind of things, these kind of informations, and so the people can react immediately. They see it in real time, how things happen, and they can react to the information they so gather. So and that we just talk about transportation. You can have similarities about similar things about energy, or heat, or water consumption. There's a totally different question. about the master degree to study smart cities. So, I mean, all what we do is here is this is part of the IGLUS program. So the IGLUS program is an executive master program that we offer, where we go around the world, and please look on our websites, and there, there it's not just a lecture, a particular lecture. There we do field visits. We look at examples. We look at good examples, at bad examples, and you can really see how the smart city unfolds. We tour around the world. We see the different cultural, political, economic, technological contexts. So one thing is, and that's what we do on this MOOC, to give some overall broad conceptualization of smart cities, but all of that has to be put into a particular context. Before I talked about legacy cities, so there is always an application of the smart city, and never things are as clear or as smooth as they look on the slides. And I think that the kind of master degree we offer is to look at concrete examples, analyze what went wrong, how you can improve it, what are the good examples, if there are good examples, what are the conditions, why do they work, and basically who can learn from each other. Okay, further questions. How do we measure the smartness of a city? That is a very good question. I think that the first thing would be to really. So there are people who try to develop indicators and rankings of smart cities, and if you do that, you have to develop some sort of measures whereby you can say a city is smarter than another, and so far what I see is there is no systematicity in that. It really depends very much who develops these kind of measures. So if the measure is developed, let's say, more like from a hardware perspective, smartness will be measured by the amount of smartphones or the amount of the kilometers of fibers that have been rolled out, or whatever, how connected the people are, things like that. If you measure if smartness is more defined from a perspective of, I don't know, public policy, they would look more at, and we discussed that somewhere in the slides. They would look more at, are we creating conditions for companies to appear that or do we have jobs in these kind of technologies, things like that. So there is not currently, I would say, an objective measure of what smart is. But what I would like to say here is that smart, and that's the danger of measuring this, smart is not a goal in itself. Smart is a tool, and I think that should become clear from our MOOC. I mean, smart is a tool for the goal is making cities more efficient, more sustainable, and more resilient. And smartness is a means towards that. Now, you could measure how good are we in having these means, but maybe that doesn't make that much sense. Okay. Another question: what is the role of citizens in smart city development? I mean, from the outside, I would say, the role is absolutely crucial. You cannot develop a smart city against the citizens or without the citizens. Now, the question is more, how do you look at this? Are they simply consumers of smart city services? That could be a way. In which case, the role of citizens is consumers of smart. Do they uptake the service? Do they use smart public transport? Do they use smart water devices? Do they have all these smart tools in their house, in their habitat? So that could be one view. I think this is a little bit. I mean, it's important, but it's still a quite consumeristic view of the role of the citizen in the smart city development. Of course, you need it. If people don't uptake the smart the smart technologies, devices, the services, you will never have a smart city. But what we advocate in our MOOC is that the citizens should be more than simply consumers of smart services. The citizens should participate in the development, in the design of the smart, in the areas in which it should be smart, in designing where it is actually useful for them, and that may not just be for consumption purposes. So we have said that there are many things. There are tools for smart citizen participation, where people can give feedback immediately, where they are consulted, where different groups are consulted in the city. And so that is a much more active role of citizens in smart cities than simply being consumers of services. In any case, citizens the potential of the ICTs in a city are much, much bigger than simply to create services. No matter how intelligent they are, we are interested in also the active involvement of the citizens in the development. So the smart technologies are also a tool for helping citizens learn, adapt, cooperate with each other, give feedback to different things, to policies, to different actions. So we attribute a very big role to the citizens. Then there is another question on the role of urban planners in smart city development. Planning is again. I think we can come back to this distinction we made before between sort of a legacy city where things have been planned already, and they have not been planned. We know that with the particular aim of making a city smart, and that's one of the big issues. There was the planning of the roads, the planning of the transport, the planning of the buildings, and the things like that. And the technologies now help us to connect these things again. If you are in a greenfield environment, then the planning is much more easier. Theoretically. And what we would advocate for is some sort of integration between planning the technology infrastructure, planning the other physical infrastructure, planning the services, planning the citizen involvement, to come back to what we said before. So in any case, it will have to be a much more integrated planning than just the sectoral planning that we had in the past. So, other questions. Okay. Wow. Insurance companies' role for smart city developments. I must admit that's something we have not really thought about. All I have seen and all I know is that insurance companies are interested very interested in smart cities and smart city development. And the reason why is because if they can use the information communication technologies to make infrastructures more resilient. They can anticipate all kind of things. Then they can save. They can save on insurance money that they have to give in case something goes wrong. So potentially the insurance companies would be very interested in using all kind of smart devices in order to favor business models that help them. So it creates really opportunities probably for insurance, but that's something we haven't really gone into detail yet. Maybe we would also need new rules and new rules to sort of allow for these kind of things. And of course, you have to watch out on all kind. I mean, the typical regulatory issues like privacy and all that would still have to apply. Okay. Other question: best example of smart cities. Okay, now this is also a tricky question because, of course, I mean what we have seen in the last few years is that every city says they are a smart city, or even say that they are the smartest city, and frankly, we have traveled a lot, but we have not visited all the cities. We already talked about the rankings before. I think most of these rankings are somehow biased. And then I think it would be difficult to say, this is the smartest city, the second smartest. But you could more look into sectoral kind of things, and you could indeed say that in the area of transport there are certain cities that have come up with quite smart transportation solutions. In energy it is others. I'm not going to sort of make a ranking between smart cities, but it's clear that in Asia there are, in some Asian cities that we have visited, that you can clearly say they are more advanced. Scandinavia is also rather advanced. So Northern Europe in general, but I think I can link it to what we said before. We would need indeed some good measures whereby, and again to say what before, smart not being a goal, but not being a goal, but a means. To sort of where is a city in the process of using technologies, the information communication technologies, to become more efficient, resilient, and sustainability. In our readings that we have given in the course, there are a lot of examples where you will find, examples of smart cities in particular areas. Okay. Other question: smart cities for developing countries. Is it a good strategy? Okay, I see where this question comes from. The question is a little bit: is smart a luxury for rich countries, and do the developing countries not first have other priorities to feed the people, the things before they can really invest into becoming into developing smart cities? This is not really my opinion. I think, the technologies, the information and communication technologies, which are at the root of the smart city, are global. Yes, they have a cost, but the cost is affordable for many. I mean, if you don't have the most sophisticated, most advanced technologies, it's affordable. So I think it is at the reach of also developing countries, and we have a lot of examples where precisely developing countries a lot of smart city development going on in India, for example, or in Africa. So for me, this is not this is not another, rich versus poor country kind of argument. I think that the potential of smart cities is everywhere, and maybe in the developing countries you can move faster because you can leapfrog on some of the things that have been done somewhere else. I mean, transportation, smart transportation tools and technologies can also be applied in developing or emerging countries. Uh, so and then you don't always necessarily have to be at the forefront. You can wait a little bit and not make every mistake that the most advanced ones have made, and you can, so it's not, in my view, smart city is not about the latest high-tech technology that you absolutely have to have, and where you will necessarily always lag behind because somewhere else there is always something more advanced. It's also smart in the intelligent sense. You choose the relevant technologies to solve the type of problems that you have. Okay, there is a question about mobility as a service. What my view is on mobility as a service. Okay, so we in the MOOC I talked from a conceptual point of view. I personally think that there is, in the medium term, there is no alternative to mobility as a service. Mobility will necessarily move away from a transport tool to a service of mobility, in the sense that people will buy the service to get from A to B, no matter what transportation means is involved. So in my view, this is an inevitable evolution, but there are a lot of factors involved. It has to do with density, urbanization. I think the more urbanized, the more densely populated, the more congested, the more likely mobility as a service will emerge. But that does not necessarily mean that mobility as a service will not emerge in rural areas either. But I think this is the future. I mean, the future is, even as the word says, the future is not cars plus train plus metro plus tram plus something like that. The future is mobility. People want to be mobile, and they want to use the best means to get the fastest, in the most ecological way to some other place. And the ICTs will just help to do that. Okay. Holistic approach. Is a holistic approach necessary? Is absolutely necessary. I mean, this is a holistic approach. Smart city is a holistic approach. Everything. In our course, we have made the argument that, I mean, we have struggled a lot to come up with a good conceptualization of a city. And the best thing we found, and we explained that in the MOOC, the best thing we found is to see the city as a system. And the system's view is a holistic view. Things are all related with each other. Now this sounds a little bit overwhelming and all that. You always have but I don't think that you can have a smart city without having a holistic view. You can optimize elements here and there, but ultimately you have to look at them, how they interact. So we can have, I don't know, we can have, before we talked about automated cars or electric cars or something like that, maybe totally desirable from an environmental point of view, but there are other elements that have the energy consumption, the electricity consumption, all that. So you really have to look at the whole urban system And there, I think the concepts that we have come up with, efficiency and sustainability and resilience, are for the whole system. They are not just for one little element. So yes, holistic. I mean, without holistic approach, I don't think you get a smart city. Okay, I think there's a good question here. Examples of smart cities built from scratch: Masdar or Songdo, Masdar in the UAE or Songdo in Korea, and the person says nobody wants to live there. Okay, I think that's an interest. That's an interest. First, in Masdar, nobody lives there to begin with, so it's much less developed than that. So it's not. I mean, there's a lot of hype of saying it's a smart. Songdong is much more developed, and it is true that you know. It very much depends on how you see a smart. I mean, if the smart city is a totally optimized, 100% efficient kind of system that leaves no leeway to the citizen to decide what they want to do. Everything is decided. The window shades go down when the sun comes up. The heat turns off when the toilet flushes. When the detector says something. So I think I would agree with that person who said that could be a quite unlivable kind of city, and that's why the question before, citizen participation. I mean, smart is not just, in our view, about optimizing the individual freedom out of the system. I should also give more opportunities to the people. So I remember there was an example. We never hear about this anymore, but there was an example where I think a Microsoft subsidiary had built a 10,000 people city in Portugal. We never hear about it anymore because probably it was not that livable either. So that's something to watch out for, and I think it's a very good question. Yeah, and that brings me to the whole question of downside of smart cities. I think this is one of the examples. A totally technocratic city where people lose their freedom and everything is automatized. Even the people are automatized, and I think that's not that could be a downside. But I think the vision that we promote in this MOOC is that there is more to the ICTs than just making everything more efficient. I mean, we have also in other contexts used the word cognitive cities. We have published but simply because we talk about the fact that maybe smart is just a former stage. Cognitive will be the net where people can learn, where the city can learn itself, when it can learn from its mistakes, and where it can create, and that's maybe more than simply smart. Maybe I can say that here. The concept of smart cities is very much, if we have analyzed really, so what do people who use the word smart city actually mean, and you can, and it is very much related to efficiency. I mean, the dominant view of what a smart city is in the literature is, it's a highly efficient city. But as we say, there should be more to that. A resilient city is maybe a little bit less efficient, but it's more resilient. And so maybe in a few years we will not use the word smart cities anymore, but this is what we do today. Okay, now there is another question which I cannot really answer. Are local currencies part of the solution? Frankly, I don't. I mean that I think that's another kind of thing. Local currencies emerge. We see them, but how they are related to smart cities is not clear to me. Are they a solution to? They may be a solution to certain problems, volatile currencies or inflation or things like that. But I wouldn't necessarily put them in the context of smart. At least I have not thought enough about it to be able to say they are part of smart cities or not part of smart cities. I think it's another kind of movement. Okay, other question. Is smart governance needed for smart cities? Absolutely. I mean, we are interested. Before I talked about the IGLUS project, we call it innovative governance. Actually, in the beginning we called it intelligent governance. Of course, the governance needs to go, and that needs to go with the change of the technology that has happened. So, the traditional way of governing is also made obsolete by the information and communication technology. I mean, the nature of these technologies is that it's not simply an infrastructure, it's also changing and or can potentially change the way the people interact with each other, the way things are decided, who is responsible, who controls what. So the use, traditionally we would have used the word e-government or e-governance, the use of the ICTs for governance. But it is clear that the governance has to become equally smart as the technologies that we are using for measuring things, for observing things, for monitoring things. And maybe there is still a little bit a gap of what that exactly means, but for us it is certainly clear that the governance needs to adapt to this new situation, and that the ICTs have to be part of that governance. Not only governing the ICTs, but using the ICTs for governance. Okay. Good question. How can governments help to spread smart city services? Okay, that raises the whole question of the digital divide. That smart city services, I mean, we hear that a lot. It's a generational issue. The older people are not capable to really make use of all these smart services that are emerging. And indeed, it is true that some people, rather of the older generation, I mean, they have not grown up with this. And therefore, the role of government is education, is to help, to support, and where necessary, to offer in parallel digital and non-digital service. But this is something that's a transition period. So it can be accelerated by government support in terms of education and training. But I personally don't think that the digital divide is that. It may be more a social divide than a generational divide, that some people cannot afford certain things, and you would have to find some sort of collective solutions, community centers and things like that. Okay, the role of national authorities. Now, I think that opens up a whole interesting question. I mean, we talk about smart cities, and I think I mean, that's not even precise enough. We should be talking about smart metropolitan areas. The relevant entity is the metropolitan area, not the political entity of the city. But the role of national authorities in all this, in my view, it's, of course, you hear countries that say we are a smart country, okay? But for me, the role of the national authority is to create the conditions so that the smart metropolitan area or the smart urban area can emerge. There are some regulatory conditions like privacy law, data access laws, things like that, maybe even subsidizing financing mechanisms, laws about which data are public, which are private, things like that, that have to be formulated at the national level, or in the case of Europe, at the European level. So the national authorities, in my view, are enablers of smart cities or smart metropolitan areas. They are not the substitutes or the alternatives to it. Their role is to create the conditions. Okay, other questions? There is a question, would you please explain the role of light as a service model in smart city? I'm not sure I understand. There is smart lighting.
Smart energy service.
Yeah, it's part of smart energy services if you want. I mean, yes, we do have we have street lightings in some countries which are turned on the whole night, are a huge waste of it. And you could have much smarter devices whereby they turn on when there is actually somebody there. And you could significantly reduce energy consumption, electricity consumption. So lighting is and then there are all kind of technological advancements with bulbs that consume much less energy. Whether that is really part of the smart is not totally clear to me. There is a question on whether there's a difference, what the difference is between e-government and digital government. I personally wouldn't make. Maybe e-government, if you want, is a little bit the old term. The term 10 years ago. Digital government is a little bit a modern term, but in my view, it's the same. It's the digitalization of government services. So we haven't talked about that in the MOOC very much. I mean, we talked about digitalization and transport, digitalization and energy. I said before we could talk about digitalization of water, of waste, of other infrastructures, but you could also go further and sort of talk about digitalization of government services. In which case we would talk about e-health, electronic health, e-voting, e-registry, all these kind of things. But some people would call it e-government, some people would call it digital government. I don't see a big difference. Other questions? Do you know, there is a question, do you know a city in the world with more than 15 million people that have been smart, be efficient? I think all the cities are doing that. I mean, we're working with a lot of big cities like who have more that have more than 15 million. Istanbul, Mexico City, Seoul. Are they really? I mean, they all make efforts to become smarter. I don't think that size. I mean, there may be size may play a role, but but I would rather see it at the lower end, in the sense that if the city is too small, then maybe it's not interesting enough to really develop. There are not enough customer base, not enough things like that. At the upper end, then maybe the big issue is, big cities, 20 million plus. Then maybe you have a coordination issue and complexity issue. But that, in my view, that has nothing to do with smart. That's a problem for every single activity in the city. So size, in my view, is not really a relevant thing. Maybe, as I said, rather at the lower end than at the upper end. Okay, there are other interesting question, which I have a hard time to answer. Is there any evidence or examples from smart city projects where the costs of running the cities has been reduced so that you would have lower taxation as a result of the city having become smaller, having become smarter? I think that would be difficult. I don't know any concrete example, but I think it's logical to say that if the city is more efficient, uses less water, less transport, or even, we talked before about mobility as a service, leading to the fact that you have less congested roads. This simply means that you have less needs to invest into the future. So I think it would be difficult to just say the tax has gone down, but the costs, maybe the future costs are reduced, and you could look at this a little bit later into the future. Any more questions or?
Question on the prioritization based on the limitations.
Sequencing.
Yeah. Okay. What be the priority focus in launching a smart cities program? Okay, considering financial limitations and private sector participation. Okay, so I think that is a good question. I think you have to start in that case. I mean, you have to start somewhere, unless you have a greenfield approach where you sort of can. But you have to start somewhere, and cities have to sort of make a decision. Do we first start with transport, or with energy, or with water, or with waste, or with e-health services, or something like that? So if you are making this decision on the basis of financial considerations, saying we don't have much money, so where is the best way to start? Then I would say probably transport is the best way to start, because transport is something where you will find private investors to really help make transport more efficient. So from a purely, and in any case, probably transport is the good area to start, because this is generally, for every city of a certain size, this is the major problem, where you can have the smart city concept can bring you gains relatively rapidly. So I think that's certainly one of. But different cities have different priorities, and they have different, they have also different expertise or different companies that help them, and therefore that will. If you have, I mean, we work a lot with utilities companies. So it also depends who is sort of the motor of, or the carrier of the smart city project in a city. Of course, there is the city, the municipal, the city authorities, or the metropolitan areas. But if you have behind that a utility company, an energy company, or a public transportation company, or a water company, that the public authorities can use that to implement smart city, that helps significantly. And maybe that's something people have asked before, you know, sort of more advanced and less advanced. In what I see is the cities that move faster are the cities that somehow have at their disposal some utilities. They can be totally owned or partially owned by the cities that help them implement the smart city concept. Okay. Anything else? I don't know what time is it. So 4 o'clock. So we have to finish in 2 minutes. So any last questions? Maybe I have not answered all the questions. There is a whole list there, but
they can discuss this in the forum as well. They
yeah.
can go to the forum, ask the questions there. So.
Yeah, so I mean, if you have other questions, you can always go to the forum, and then you can discuss this in the forum, and we participate in the forum. And so, okay, I think it very interesting questions. Thank you very much. Okay, any last question? Would you please explain the role of citizen learning at Smart City, in Smart City, for Smart City? Probably something like this. Of course, the citizens need to learn, but the citizens are already pretty smart. I don't think that the citizens are the limitation to the Smart City, personally. They need to be given the opportunity to participate, but the citizens are generally already smart enough for the smart city. So that's not the limiting factor in my view. Okay, so thank you very much for attending, and see you maybe another time in one of these discussions.